Over the years, I've gathered quite a large collection of tools for my woodworking shop, but none of those tools quite compare to the table saw. I use this one probably more than any tool in my shop. And today we're going to go over some tips, tricks, upgrades. We're going to make your stock table saw go from a good table saw to a great table saw. Stick around. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into probably what is one of, if not my favorite upgrade to add to any table saw. Now, every table saw you're going to buy, new at least, is going to have a miter gauge. Most of those smaller saws are going to have a cheap plastic one. They're not very accurate. Luckily, the one that came with mine is pretty accurate. It's got a lot of adjustability. However, it does not provide the capability. Miter gauge with a fence on it gives you way more area here to put your workpiece up against. And a positive of this particular one, it's actually got an extendable fence. Loosen this up, extend it on out here, and you've got nearly 30 inches of room here, so you can cut quite a large board with that. Now, the good folks over at Banggood sent me this one. Just a few features here. It's actually got two levers that you can raise up and down. That way, if you want to set one or the other. Stop block's quite easy to adjust as well. You can see this knob here. You just twist, move that wherever you want to, of course on the upper portion. Lock it down. It's also got these red tabs here if you want to go by the actual measurements. I don't really utilize that very much because I'm going to be marking my workpiece and then going off of that, not really paying attention to these measurements. Now, this particular miter gauge, you can see this nicely machined handle here. You just loosen that up when you want to adjust. Pull out this little knob and twist it to where it's not set in anymore. And then you can adjust to any angle you want. And you can see though it does have the positive stops as well. And this thing, say what you want, even though it's a cheaper one, this thing is dead on accurate. Although I can't figure out how to adjust the thing just yet. I've not messed with it a whole lot, but it's perfect 90 degrees, perfect 45 degrees. You can't ask for better than that. So let's go ahead and set up for a 90-degree cut here. Here we are after cutting this at 90 degrees. We'll go ahead and check that with our square. And you can see that thing is perfect. I didn't film it, but went through the cutting a 45 degree just to show you how accurate that is. This is probably not the best way of doing this, but that's what I've got. We'll go here with a 45 degree. As you can tell, no gaps whatsoever. That thing, as I said, I'm glad it's accurate because I don't quite know how to adjust it yet. But either way, it is accurate, and I'm thankful for that, and it works great. Now, up next, as far as upgrades go, one of the best things you can add to a table saw, or even a router table as far as that goes, is a good featherboard. A good featherboard is going to help you keep that material tied up to the fence, so there's no chance of that board rocking back and forth, causing a kickback, potentially getting yourself hurt. So let's show you exactly how that works. So first things first, we're going to locate our pieces on the back of the featherboard, align those with the slots for the miter gauge. Now, a lot of these are a fairly tight fit for a good reason. Once you get them lined in there, push down and tighten. That's actually going to spread that out a little bit, keep it from rocking back and forth. And now when you adjust this, you don't want to put an immense amount of pressure on that thing because that's going to jam your wood up, and that's potentially dangerous. So what I personally do, I'll get it tied up against it and just push very slightly. And then tighten both knobs down. And you can see that piece of wood still moves freely, but it doesn't really want to come backward. And it's going to give us a good safe cut. Now when you do install this, you want to make sure it is, I guess it depends on how you're looking at it, in front of the blade, not up here next to it, because you're going to pinch your pieces of wood. There's another kickback. Let's run this piece through. And so another upgrade we're going to talk about is dust collection. I'm sure everybody knows about this, but as you can see here, I purposely ran that before without any dust collection, and you can see quite the mess here. So we're going to go ahead and put dust collection on and see how much cleaner we get. I'll clean this off, of course, and then see the results. And so what I use for dust collection on my table saw is this rigid 16-gallon shop vac. The hose actually fits the table saw perfectly, so I don't have to look for adapters and that kind of stuff. Plenty of power to keep that thing clean. So let's see how this thing works out for us. And as you can see here, quite a difference in the results. A lot less dust here. The way I see that, there's more dust in the shop vac than there is on the table saw, and that's a win-win. Now the next upgrade I wanted to talk about is this router table insert. This naturally does not come on this particular table saw. I actually took a piece of plywood, made it look a little better by, making the color similar to this one. But either way, it's worked great. Now this is just a cheap insert. I do wish, however, I went with a router lift. Let me show you how I have to adjust this one. So as you can see under here, basically with any router, it's just upside down. The way I have to adjust it, open the latch, and then twist this to whatever depth I need it to be, and then close the latch back. So it's a little more inconvenient, and it works, but the router lift would be way better, and that may be something I add on down the line. And in my opinion, one of the best things about adding a wing into your table saw is you've got the fence here. You can also double as a fence for your router as well. Now later on, I do plan on adding a more substantial fence that'll sit over top of this one, that'll allow adjustable faceplates and that kind of thing, just to give it a little more versatility. Now, one of my most controversial pieces I've ever done, posting online, that kind of stuff, I've got a lot of heat over this one, and so I'm going to tell you, I'm not telling you to do this. If you don't feel comfortable with it, do not do this. But what I've done, I've actually added a fence tray. Now, I think a big part of the controversy is a lot of people thought it was just sitting here and I'm going to knock it off. But if you'll notice, this actually, the way I've got it made, takes a decent amount of effort to get off without spilling everything. You can see these little pieces I've got underneath. They act as wedges right between this fence. And so it takes a good amount of pressure to install it, and it holds a lot of tension, so there's no danger in it coming off without a good amount of force. And as far as being dangerous, I get the point. Maybe afraid something I've got in this tray is going to come off, hit the saw, and that is a definite possibility. So I'm not saying that ain't going to happen. However, I will say that I have been using this for years now. It has served me well. I've had no accidents whatsoever. Nothing's ever came off of this, hit the blade, or even come off and went the opposite direction. They have all stayed right where I kept them. And, like I said, I'm not telling you to do that, but for me, it works great in my shop. Gives me a little extra storage, keeps my stuff convenient where I need it. And so a couple other store-bought ones I want to run through real quick. I've actually featured these on other videos. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail. Now, this particular one is a set of Dado blades. I know some countries you're not allowed to have those. So that's one reason I decided not to feature it a whole lot in this video, but those are a great option if you have the choice. And then the kerf maker, I've also got a video on that one. Let me give you a quick demonstration of that. Okay, for the kerf maker, the first thing you're going to do is want to get the offset of your blade. So that's the first thing I do, which I've got that locked down. If you want to check that in my previous video, I'll leave a link to that. But the main one you're going to worry about here today is measuring your workpiece that you're going to make a dado for. And so you can see here, I've actually got that set up already. That's going to lock it in. And so we're going to Not really going to pick a measurement, but you can see I've got a stop block. So the first thing we're going to do is set this edge. You see one is sticking out farther than the other. We're going to set that up against the fence. Put this up here. Now you can, if you're not comfortable holding this and this, once you get it set up, just hold the piece down and move that. We'll turn it on, and I've got the blade set about halfway through. And we take the kerf maker again, but this time we flip it over to the bottom piece that was technically shorter. Butt that up against the stop block. Hold your workpiece down. Run it through again. Now from here, you're actually just going to take out what's left. Just cut through those. And if everything works out like we wanted it to, we'll take this piece, and that locks in there a good friction fit. So that thing is worth its weight in gold. So for the next upgrade, this one is technically homemade with the exception of adding a stop block. And of course I got a T-track on top here just to hold that. But this is just a table saw sled. Very crude, nothing fancy, just 2x4s and a piece of plywood with some runners underneath. Very simple to make, but very useful in the workshop. And as I said, just very crude, 2x4s, plywood, that kind of stuff. I do have a hole here just so I can hang it on the wall. But this particular piece is not exceptionally crucial that it be perfectly 90 degrees. That's just your front edge is going to hold everything together. However, the one that's back here, that's where you're going to get your accuracy from. And so the best thing I can tell you as far as getting this thing accurate, raise your table saw blade up, put your square in here, line it up against that, set it off of that, but don't glue it down quite yet because you may have to adjust. But a very nice upgrade if you've not made one yet. And of course, the table saw sled being an upgrade, I actually went one further and added an upgrade to the upgrade. And as you can see, this is basically just a V. So that gives you a 45-degree cut. And what you would do is take something like this, lay it in here and cut it back and forth on each side, all the way around, until you're left with something similar to this. You can see I just made just a cheap little pencil holder. And you can take a contrasting wood, like this one's got little tiny walnut strips. So the last little upgrade I wanted to show you that I added to my shop, this one is homemade as well. But this little 15-degree wedge sled that I've made, literally just a hardwood strip here for a runner, piece of melamine so that it's good and slick, some oak strips here, and some toggle clamps just to keep that piece down. You know, this comes in handy if you're doing any kind of segmented wood turning, anything decorative along those lines. So let me show you how this thing works. Now they do have similar pieces to this that you can buy store-bought or even make them as far as that goes to make this adjustable. 15 degrees is one I use most commonly, and I had to scrap, so I just set this to be a hard 15 degrees. That way I don't have to keep adjusting it. And what we'll do is set up a block here with a clamp on it behind the blade or in front of the blade, however you want to look at it. And so that allows us to make the cut, and the piece will fall off the side of it safely without getting into the blade and flying out of there. So you can think of this as your line because that's the edge of where the blade runs. So you want to cut the end off to make that 90 degrees go away. And so you're sitting your 15 degrees. So just nudge it over, lock it down, then run it through. And this one just happens to be a little short for these clamps. But either way, for your next cut, you just flip that over, butt it up against this piece of wood, run it through again. And before you know it, you can make it almost a complete circle. And with the help of a somewhat large hose clamp here, we'll tighten that up. You can see that's basically a nice circle. Good for segmented turning, decorative woodworking, crafting pieces, that kind of stuff. Great little option to add to the shop. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Hopefully you found some of these tips and tricks and tools. You know, it may be something that you want to implement into your shop. I hope so. They work great in my shop. But anyway, I appreciate you watching. If you've stuck with me this far, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. We'll see you on the next one.